You have 24 hours to decide. The old man's voice rang like iron through the air. Either you marry Zelina, or you forget about ever receiving your inheritance. Far from that moment of command, in the lush heart of Oduma, there once lived a couple, Ayanda and Tabena, who had shared love and longing for 10 years, but never a child. Tabena, loyal and kind, never blamed Ayanda for their empty cradle. He believed their waiting was shared, that if children had not come, it was not her fault alone. But his mother saw things differently. She sharpened every silence into criticism, turning every meal into a lecture mocking Ayanda's food, her walk, and worst of all, her womb. Ayanda endured until one quiet morning, when weariness hung from her like wet cloth. She turned to her husband and said softly, "Tabena, all children come from the Creator. Can we please go to Mademoiselle's home and adopt?" Mademoiselle was known throughout Oduma for taking in orphan children with a heart as wide as the savannah. "Please, my husband," Ayanda begged, her voice cracked with hope. "Let's not keep waiting for a miracle that may never arrive." Tabena exhaled deeply, shaking his head. "You know how I feel. I'm not sure I could love another man's child like my own." Her eyes filled with tears. At this point, she didn't care whose child it was, only that her arms no longer be empty. She whispered, "Then maybe you should marry someone who can give you a child. Let there be a baby in this home, even if she calls me mother only in name." Tabena's eyes burned. "Don't mock the love we share," he said sharply. "I didn't marry you for children, I married you for you." Then he left her there in silence. But that night, Tabena could not rest. Her words twisted through his dreams. In all the years they'd been together, she had never said anything like that. By dawn, he entered the kitchen where she stood stirring porridge and whispered, "My wife, I've heard your heart. We will adopt from Mademoiselle, but," he paused, "I want a daughter. A boy will carry another man's blood with my name. I'm not ready for that." The words stung, but Ayanda stayed silent. A child was a child. Later that day, she walked the long dusty road to Madame Ose's home. The old woman sat on her porch, rocking a wailing infant, her eyes sunken from fatigue. "He hasn't stopped crying all morning," she said. "Let me try," Ayanda offered gently, reaching out, and the moment she held him, the baby fell quiet, curling into her like he belonged there. A warmth she couldn't explain bloomed in her chest. "Has anyone come for him?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," Mademoiselle said, adjusting her scarf. "He arrived this morning. No name, no visitors." Ayanda's heart swelled. "Then I want to take him home." Mademoiselle hesitated. "You came for a girl, remember?" Ayanda looked down at the baby, who now slept peacefully in her arms. "Yes, but this boy feels like mine." Still, afraid to upset Tabena, she asked to see the girl too. Mademoiselle nodded and left to fetch her. But as soon as Ayanda tried to hand the boy back, he wailed violently, arms flailing, his cries like thunder in her soul. She stayed the entire day feeding, rocking, singing old lullabies, and as dusk fell, she knew what her heart had already decided. "I will take this child," she said firmly. "He is my son." Mademoiselle studied her, then nodded. "Then, be honest with your husband soon." But Ayanda said nothing. She returned home with the baby wrapped in soft pink cloth and a delicate bonnet. "This is our daughter," she told Tabena. Tears brimmed in his eyes as he held the child. "She's perfect." They named her Zelina. Weeks passed. Tabena fell deeply in love with the child, unaware of the secret Ayanda carried. But guilt weighed her down. One evening, she prepared his favorite meal, cassava stew with smoked antelope, and wore the coral-colored wrapper he adored. She had decided to tell him the truth. As the stew simmered, she stepped outside to gather the laundry. That's when it happened. A low growl split the air. From the tree line emerged a bloodied hyena feral, wounded, its fur matted with gore. Behind it came a frantic hunter with a bow. But the beast moved faster than death. Ayanda turned just as the arrow flew meant for the hyena. It struck her chest. She collapsed without a sound. The hunter screamed, but it was too late. When Tabena came running, his wife lay still in the yard, a blood-soaked bonnet clenched in her fading hand. He fell beside her, his cries echoing into the night, as the news began to spread like wildfire through Oduma. Mama Tabena came the very same day her daughter-in-law was buried, stepping into the grief-stricken home like a matron on a mission. She took over the kitchen, the laundry, and most importantly, the care of little Zelina, trying to restore a sense of routine amidst heartbreak. But while changing the baby's wrap cloth one afternoon, her hands froze mid-motion. She stared at the undeniable truth before her eyes, then waited until the house had fallen into silence before gently approaching her son. "My son," she said softly, "there's something you must see." And Tabena, already worn thin by sorrow, followed her with a heart half broken and half confused when she showed him. He was speechless, staring down at the truth of it. Ayanda had brought home a boy, not the daughter she claimed, and with that revelation burning in his chest, Tabena rushed to Mademoiselle's home, his steps heavy with shock and betrayal. The old woman met him at the door, eyes steady, and simply said, she chose him from the moment she held him. He was hers, as if she had birthed him herself. And Tabena's voice cracked, "I don't know what to do," to which Madame Assay responded gently, "She was going to tell you. She just wanted to wait until you loved him enough to see past the truth." And Tabena stood in silence for a long time before whispering, "I'll bring him back tomorrow. My wife is gone now." And with that, he turned and left, carrying the weight of loss in one arm and the child no longer claimed in the other. The next morning, wrapped in a warm shawl, the baby nestled quietly as Tabena began his slow walk toward the orphanage, sunlight dripping through the trees like golden threads, each step filled with doubt, until at the edge of the path he encountered Obasi, one of Oduma's wealthiest and most powerful traders, a man whose name carried weight across markets and councils alike. Obasi had once publicly denied Tabena a supply contract, humiliating him in front of other merchants, but now his tone was uncharacteristically somber. "I heard about Ayanda," he said, extending a hand. "She was a good woman." "I'm sorry," and Tabena, startled and uncertain, nodded quietly. But Obasi's eyes had already drifted down to the child. "I know I can't bring her back," he said, his voice softer now, "but the contract I refused you yesterday. Take it. For the sake of that child." And Tabena blinked, stunned. This was the same man who had once sneered at his name, and now he was offering a coveted deal that traders fought fiercely to win, all because of this boy who stirred gently in his arms, curling closer like he'd always belonged there. They agreed to meet again the next day to finalize the arrangement, and as Tabena turned back toward home, Obasi's words echoed in his ears, "For the sake of that child." And Tabena found himself holding the boy tighter, whispering softly, "Maybe you're my blessing. Maybe you were sent to change everything." And when he returned home, he found Mama Tabena crushing herbs in the kitchen. He told her everything, every word, every change, every sign, and after a long silence, she looked up and said, "Then, don't return him. Keep him, raise him as your own. I'll stay here and help. Together, we can do it." And so, after hours of honest discussion, they named the boy Jabari. The years passed like songs sung by time, and Jabari grew into a gentle, spirited boy with wide eyes and a heart that opened like morning light under Tabena's roof. He was clothed and fed, but a quiet strain always lingered between father and son. Tabena's fortune soared. What once was a humble patch of land turned into acres of yam and banana plantations, all stemming from the day Obasi reversed his decision, a change that had begun the moment Jabari stayed. 2 years after Ayanda's death, Tabena remarried, and his new wife bore a son, Madhu. Clever and sharp as a thorn, Jabari, though kind and joyful, struggled with numbers, couldn't follow trade talk, forgot details, and fumbled through ledgers like they were written in the wind, while Madhu absorbed it all like a sponge in the sun. And though Jabari's mind wandered, his heart was magic. He made people laugh when they wept, told stories that made elders chuckle and children tumble with joy, imitated accents and village elders perfectly, and warmed even the grumpiest souls with his awkward, dazzling smile. One evening, Tabena returned from inspecting his lands and found a crowd outside his home. Everyone was gathered around Jabari, laughing and clapping as he mimicked the council chief's crooked walking stick and deep voice. And while the village cheered, Tabena's face darkened. He pushed through the circle, grabbed Jabari's wrist, and yanked him aside, his voice sharp and low. "How many times have I told you stop making a fool of yourself in front of people? You've achieved nothing. And yet you..." But Jabari's wide eyes said everything. "I was only trying to bring joy. You stand here, grinning like a street jester, entertaining villagers as if your life were a carnival." Tabena snapped, his voice low and tense as he yanked Jabari aside. The boy blinked, confused and hurt, unsure how to respond. "Papa, they're the ones who come to me. They say I make them feel better." But Tabena's expression only darkened, his jaw tight with anger. "They laugh because you let them. They mock you because they see no purpose in you. You're jobless, idle, and so they find you when they're bored." And with that, he turned away, disgusted. Days later, Tabena heard of a wealthy merchant named Adeyemi, a trader looking for someone to distribute unique local food products to royal outposts. A golden opportunity, and with few options left, he reluctantly sent Jabari with a basket. "OF samples. You've never been there before," he muttered bitterly. "Try not to embarrass me too much." And Jabari, used to his father's sharp tongue, simply nodded with his usual soft smile. "I'll do my best." After a long walk through the village outskirts, Jabari arrived at Dami's grand estate and found a young woman seated at the front gate, her legs stretched before her, eyes calm but knowing. She looked like someone who had lived many lives. In silence, "Excuse me," Jabari greeted politely. "I've brought samples for Mr. Adeyemi. Can you please help me call him?" She tilted her head, smirking. "Should I vanish into thin air or fly on feathers? Because I'm certainly not walking anywhere." And when Jabari looked puzzled, she laughed and pointed to her legs. "I'm crippled. Been sitting here since sunrise, and I'll still be here at moonrise." And embarrassed, Jabari stammered, "I didn't know, I'm so sorry." But she waved him off. No harm done, and just like that, they began to talk, and as always, Jabari's awkward, stumbling humor broke through the walls people didn't even know they had. Soon, laughter echoed through the compound, and moments later, Adeyemi himself emerged from the veranda. "Zelina, what's all this noise?" he asked, and she, still laughing, pointed to Jabari. "It's him. He's funny." And Adeyemi turned to Jabari with an arched brow, then to the basket. "You brought the food?" "Yes, sir," Jabari said, and the merchant inspected the contents. 7 items, he said slowly. "But I'll only try one today. Bring me one new product each day for 6 days. On the 7th, I'll decide if I want to work with your father. Zelina will receive you each time. And come alone. I don't deal with rotating faces." And Jabari nodded with a bow. "I understand, sir." When he returned home and relayed the terms, Tabena just grunted, "Don't ruin this." And for 6 days, Jabari walked the trail with a new sample each time. But each visit, Adeyemi was conveniently unavailable, leaving word for Jabari to wait with Zelina until he returned. And each time under the neem tree, they talked, they laughed, and something gentle blossomed between them. On the 5th day, Zelina turned to him with a playful smirk and said, "Jabari, you should be a royal jester." And he blinked, unsure if she was teasing or serious. "A jester?" he repeated, confused, but she nodded. "Last year I visited the kingdom of Nambara with my father. At the palace banquet, they brought out the official court jester. He made even the king weep with laughter. And I overheard a minister say he'd be retiring in 2 years. They'll need someone new. And Jabari's heart fluttered. Never before had his laughter been treated as a gift, a profession, a purpose. Not farming, not business, but making people feel again. That night he lay awake, Zelina's words echoing in his mind. A jester, and for once, the title didn't sound insulting. It sounded like destiny. 2 days later, on the 7th visit, Oduma himself arrived at Tabena's compound in his flowing robes, cane tapping the earth like a heartbeat. "I've made my decision," he announced. "I'll go into business with you. But on one condition," and Tabena's brow furrowed. "What is it?" Oduma smiled. "I want your son Jabari to marry my daughter," and the air stilled. "I've watched them all week. Zelina hasn't laughed like that since she lost the use of her legs. There's something rare between them. It may not be love yet, but it's something most never find." And Tabena, stunned and speechless, felt a rare pride rise in his chest. This was the second time his adopted son had attracted fortune. The first was Obasi's contract, and now this. "This boy brings blessings," he thought, and without hesitation, he reached out his hand. "We accept." That evening, Jabari returned home smiling, recounting another one of Zelina's jokes when suddenly his father pulled him into a tight embrace. It was the first time in his life Tabena had ever hugged him, and Jabari froze, unsure what to say until his father whispered, "You've finally made your father proud. Oduma wants to make you his son-in-law." Jabari's eyes widened, stunned. "Wait, marriage?" And Tabena clapped his shoulder with rare warmth. To Zelina, "Prepare yourself. You are no longer just a joker. You are my legacy." There was a long silence between them, the kind that sits heavy in the air like rain about to fall, before Jabari finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "Papa," he said, "Zelina is a beautiful womankind, brilliant. Any man would be lucky to marry her, but I'm not ready. I want to follow my dreams." Tabena's face darkened instantly, his jaw clenching as he stepped forward. "What dreams?" He spat. "I want to become a jester," Jabari said firmly. "I want to bring people joy. That's what I want to do with my life." There was a heartbeat of silence, then an explosion. "A jester? You want to humiliate me in front of the entire village? You want to throw away a union with Oduma's family, the very thing that could change your future for foolishness?" Jabari tried to speak, "Papa, please," but Tabena cut him off, roaring, "You're rejecting her because she's crippled, aren't you? Do you even have the right to judge her? Do you know who your real parents are? And yet I raised you like my own." The words struck Jabari like a lash. He had always felt like a shadow in that house, but now the truth was no longer veiled. Seeing his son's wounded expression, Tabena calmed slightly, but his tone remained cold. "Final. You have 24 hours to decide. Marry Zelina or forget about ever inheriting anything from me." That night, Jabari lay awake, thoughts swirling like a storm. He imagined the golden halls of Nambara, the echo of laughter in royal courts, the sound of applause as he lifted spirits with humor. He whispered jokes into the dark, giggling to himself, and finally drifted to sleep with a quiet smile. The next morning, a messenger from Oduma's estate arrived to fetch him. Jabari followed, heart pounding, unsure if his decision would hurt everyone he cared about. Zelina was waiting outside, her usual warmth in her smile. "Zelina," he began, gently, "about the marriage," but she lifted a hand, silencing him. "I didn't call you here to talk about marriage." He blinked, confused. She smiled again. "Do you remember the kingdom I told you about? Nambara," he said softly. She nodded. "There's a boat leaving tonight. The only one going that way for 2 months. You need to be on it." Jabari's heart raced. "But my father would never let me go. And I don't have the money." Without a word, Zelina reached beside her and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Cowries, enough to get you there," she said. He took a step back, overwhelmed. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can," she replied gently. "Aren't we friends? When you become a rich jester, you can pay me back." Jabari looked at her, stunned. "Thank you, Zelina. I don't know what to say." As he turned to leave, something still weighed on him. "Can we talk about the marriage?" he asked quietly. But Zelina met his eyes with calm strength and, "Saad, I'll never force you. Chase your dream first. If you return one day and still wish to marry me, and I'm still available, I'll accept your offer." She didn't say it with bitterness or sadness, but with grace, the kind that comes from knowing your worth. Jabari nodded slowly, his heart heavy but filled with a strange new courage. That evening, as the moon rose over Oduma, he found Madhu behind the house fixing a woven basket. "Madhu," he whispered, "I'm leaving tonight." His younger brother looked up. "Leaving? Where?" "To Nambara," Jabari replied. "I'm going to find the king's palace. I'm going to become a jester." Madhu stared in awe, then nodded without hesitation. "I'll help you sneak out. Papa would never let you go if he knew." Under cover of darkness, Madhu led him to the riverside dock, where Jabari boarded the boat just in time, Zelina's pouch tucked tightly into his shirt. The journey was long and harsh rivers wound through thick mangrove swamps. The boat creaked under rain and wind, and they passed remote trading posts where the food was dry and the air tense. But Jabari's dream kept him going. Nearly a month later, he arrived at the border of Nambara, exhausted but filled with hope. He adjusted his robe, stepped forward, only to be stopped by guards in bronze-lined armor. "Who are you?" one asked. "I'm Jabari. I've come from Oduma. I wish to see the king." "You are not from Nambara," another barked. "Outsiders are not allowed today. Our priests are performing sacred rites." Jabari's heart sank. "Please, I've traveled for weeks. When can I enter?" The guards said nothing. One simply pointed back toward the river. The boat was preparing to leave. Without sympathy, Jabari was pushed back with other visitors. The vessel drifted away from the kingdom before he could even plead again. He sat in silence, his dreams scattered like leaves on the water. The other passengers, once laughing at his jokes, now stared at the quiet, hollow version of him. Weeks later, when the boat finally returned to Oduma, Jabari dreaded every moment of his return. Jabari couldn't bear the thought of facing Tabena's bitter stare or smug dismissal, not after returning with nothing, so he resolved not to even step foot inside the house. Instead, he would find Madhu and offer to serve him once he inherited their father's lands. But as he neared the compound, he froze at the sight before him. Mama, Tabena, and Madhu sat outside, both dressed in mourning. Black, their faces pale and worn. "Jabari," Madhu said softly, rising to his feet. "Papa has passed. He fell ill weeks ago. He never recovered." The words crashed over Jabari like a wave. His knees gave way, and he collapsed to the ground, eyes wide with disbelief. He had only been gone a few months. How could this be? Madhu reached for his hand, but Jabari pulled away and stumbled into the house, locking himself in the small room he had once shared with his brother. He stayed there for days, refusing food, refusing to speak, the silence louder than any scolding he had ever known. Then one evening, as dusk painted the sky with soft indigo light and the lanterns of Oduma began to flicker to life, Jabari finally rose. Quietly, he walked to the family burial ground where his father now lay beneath a simple wooden marker. He knelt beside the fresh grave, heart heavy, and whispered, "Papa, I couldn't make you proud. I failed again. But if you can hear me, the best thing I have to give is my laughter. It's all I truly have, and it means everything to me." And then, almost as if guided by something unseen, Jabari stood up, wiped the tears from his cheeks, and looked up at the sky. There, beside his father's resting place, he began to perform not for applause, not for approval, but from his soul. He told every joke he remembered, mimicked village elders with exaggerated grins, acted out entire scenes with invisible props, and filled the air with laughter that rose like a prayer. His voice rang out into the evening breeze, carrying both grief and joy into the heavens. When he finished, a slow clap echoed behind him. Startled, Jabari spun around. A tall man in a vibrant robe stood watching, laughter still bubbling from his chest. "Who are you?" Jabari asked, heart racing. "I came to visit an old friend's grave," the man replied between chuckles. "But I didn't expect a private performance." He stepped forward and extended his hand. "I am the royal jester of Nambara." Jabari froze, stunned. The man smiled. "For years, I've made the king and his court roar with laughter. But today you made me laugh. And I believe you are the one meant to take my place when I retire." Jabari's mouth parted, but no words came. The opportunity he had chased across lands and rivers had found him instead right here, beside his father's grave. He didn't hesitate this time. Jabari left Oduma once more, this time at the side of the royal jester himself. When they reached the kingdom's gates, the same guards who had once turned him away bowed low in respect. He was no longer a stranger. He arrived not just with a purpose, but with the laughter of royalty at his back. But before leaving Lumora forever, Jabari returned to Zelina's home. She was seated on the veranda, watching birds dart through the trees. He knelt before her, eyes bright. "My life is changing," he said gently. "I've been accepted into service at the king's palace in Nambara. But I will return within a year to ask for your hand." Zelina smiled, her voice soft but full of certainty. "I believe you, Jabari. From the day you stepped into my compound, I knew our paths were bound together." And so ends this story, not of royalty or riches, but of a gift. The kind placed deep within, the kind that doesn't need permission to shine, the kind that calls out purpose. The elders say, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. No matter how simple, how small, how easily mocked your talent may seem, if it's honest, if it carries light, the world will one day pause, turn, and listen.